LinkedIn News.
When we rest better, what changes for us?
It's hard to think of what can't change when we're well rested. I think we could all, agree after a good night's sleep, you feel like you could take on the world. When we can prioritize sleep, we're more compassionate, we're more mindful, we make better decisions, we're less emotionally reactive, we make more ethical decisions. So many things are turned in a positive direction when we can make sleep a priority.
That's sleep scientist Rebecca Robbins. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you like this episode or any others you've heard, I have a favor to ask you. Consider leaving us a review so we can keep bringing you more conversations you love. If you don't know, here's how to leave a review. On Apple Podcasts, go to the Everyday Better page, scroll down to Ratings and Reviews, and click the number of stars you want to give us. Then, right below that, click Write a Review and add your note for our team. On Spotify, you can go to our page, click the 3 dots next to the settings wheel, and select Rate Show. As always, we appreciate your feedback. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. At the start of the new year, many of us set out on a mission to reset our lives. The most classic resolutions deal with our physical health. We're going to finally go to the gym 3 times a week, lose a little bit of weight. We're going to eat cleaner. We're going to run a 10K. But today, I want to propose a very different kind of resolution around our physical health, improving our sleep. Now, maybe that sounds like a little bit of a cop-out compared to a tough new gym regimen, but to me, improving our sleep sounds almost radical. In our productivity-obsessed culture, sleep can be seen as an inconvenience, something that we have to do, only so we can wake up to get ready the next day and go to work and get more things done. Sleep is honestly not a luxury, but somehow we've come to treat it like one, which means that getting a good night's sleep is probably pretty far down on most people's list of priorities. Only 1 in 3 Americans report getting consistent and sufficient sleep, meaning that 2/3 of us aren't getting what we need. And those missed hours take a real toll, even beyond the grogginess or grumpiness that we'd expect. Sleep deficiency is linked to a slew of chronic health problems, like high blood pressure, heart and kidney disease, as well as depression and anxiety. And if you're still not convinced that sleep is super important, if your ever-growing to-do list keeps tempting you to push back your bedtime, my guest today has a simple message for you. Ignoring sleep in an effort to be more productive is actually counterproductive because your sleep and your ability to perform are linked. Dr. Rebecca Robbins is a sleep scientist and assistant professor in medicine at Harvard Medical School. And we sat down in the studio to talk about strategies for getting a great night's sleep and for resetting our relationship to rest. In our conversation, Rebecca also broke down the science of sleep and debunked some of the most pervasive myths we believe about sleep, like the idea that 8 hours is the magic number, that we can catch up on sleep over the weekend, and that falling asleep should only take us a couple of minutes. And there's good news. There are things you can do today to reset your relationship with sleep. Dr. Robbins believes that good sleep starts the moment you wake up. And she's here to give us easy and actionable tips you can use to set yourself up for an easier bedtime tonight and a more rested and productive tomorrow. Here's Rebecca.
The view of, I'll sleep when I'm dead, God forbid, is I hope something that's gone by the wayside, fingers crossed. But in my career, I hope that I'll be able to see a shift, a seismic shift, such that we can finally start to align sleep is part of the performance equation. Because right now, you go to any water cooler in America and it's, how are you? Exhausted, right? Yes. It's almost part of the fabric of
Tired
the conversation.
Or busy. Yeah.
People probably look down on someone that's like, I feel great.
I feel
well rested.
I'm great.
But can't we, hopefully, because that's got to be the culture in America. America, because we truly do need to sleep in order to succeed. And so really connecting those things and thinking about sleep as this thing that you can ever improve. It's not going to be perfect every night. It's going to fall off the rails. And when it does, what do you do about it? And having the tools to get back on track. And that's really powerful. Nutrition and exercise, you make healthy changes, and it sometimes takes a long time to see the rewards.
Right.
But with motivation, we can change your sleep literally overnight, which is really exciting.
Wow. Okay, so if we take a step back and you look at like how we Americans are doing when it comes to sleep, or how we think we're doing, what does that look like now as far as how we talk about the way we experience sleep, whether we think we're getting good sleep or not?
Well, I think that we do, in a lot of ways, have a sleep deprivation crisis. And the numbers do point to this. So about 1 in 3 Americans report getting consistent, sufficient sleep. So meeting their sleep target night in and night out in a typical month, let's say. We also have another data point that shows that only 1 in 3 Americans report waking up and feeling restored by their sleep. And so that really points to a 2/3 problem of our population that are struggling to either get enough sleep, get good quality sleep, or maybe they're struggling with sleep difficulties, difficulty falling asleep. Difficulty, maybe you can fall asleep, but then you wake up and can't fall back asleep. And what's so interesting is at a population level, we really don't have a good sleep education mechanism. I mean, in schools, growing up in America, you learn about other really important topics, but you don't often learn about sleep. And so it's kind of left in the hands of your caregiver, and hopefully that person is imparting evidence-based information. But we've published some data to show that that's not always true. Myths are kind of passed down in the family unit and, really well intended, but some caregivers will say, if you can't sleep, stay in bed. Staying in bed is better than getting up and getting out of bed. And that kind of makes sense, right? But if we start to have our bed be the place where we toss and turn, and we're not breaking that cycle and we just stay in bed, then we're going to spiral because we start to associate our bed with stress. And then, culturally also in America, maybe this is starting to go by the wayside, but hustle culture and achievement culture has kind of led to this idea that I can take away hours from my sleep and magically add them back to my day with no cost, with no decrement to my daytime function. But that is the biggest myth of all. Because taking time away from our sleep, getting lower quality sleep, if I'm working, going 1,000,000 miles a minute before the minute I want to be falling asleep, not building in time to rest, to prepare my body and my brain for sleep, then I'm going to struggle to fall asleep. It's going to be poor quality sleep. Then if we practiced and focused on some of the dictates of sleep hygiene, which is kind of powering down before bedtime, relaxing and unwinding. But Americans aren't culturally very good at those practices.
No.
So
we don't really like turning off, right? Like we're like,
No.
that's a luxury and we don't really feel like we deserve it, I think, half the time.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. If humans don't sleep, we die.
We die.
It's a biological need. And so it makes it a little bit different than other health behaviors in that way also, that we vitally need it to survive.
Yeah, this isn't a luxury. But we treat it like that.
You're right on, unfortunately.
So it's a biological need, and we all seem to have different ways that we sleep, right? Different like profiles, or I think they're called chronotypes that we experience when it comes to sleep. And I feel like culturally, we have been very like, especially in the performance wellness culture, it's like being a morning person is the best thing you can do. Waking up at this time is the way it should be, and going to bed at this time is the way that it should be. And yet there are so many people who don't fall in that category. What do you have to say to that? And how do we personalize sleep for ourselves?
Leah, this is such a good question. And you just hit the nail on the head. It's all about personalization. We are all unique and different. And also our needs change along the life spectrum. I mean, for women, even within a month between our menstrual cycles, our sleep can change. And so being aware of what your body needs and being attuned to that, and realize that it might ebb and flow as you maybe go through different phases. You're experiencing more stress. So even our individual needs change, but all of us are very different. So let's start, for instance, with sleep duration. We talk, we're like, get 8 hours of sleep, I think, for so long. But that
it's like
message is
in
almost,
my brain.
Yes, 8 hours. And you also touched on another great one, which is morning people. They seem to be the most prized in our society. So let's debunk those two. The first, in terms of duration, The vast majority of data show that adults need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours, but each of us are at a different place along that spectrum. So if you had two parents that were shorter sleepers, it's largely genetically determined, you might be lucky and be able to do really well on 7 hours. But then if you had two longer sleeping parents, closer to the 8 or 9 hour, spectrum, then you might truly need closer to 9 hours. The key is finding out where you are on that spectrum. You can do this experiment by thinking, okay, when do I truly fall asleep? And be critical with yourself. Is it 11 o'clock, or is that when you're getting into bed and then you don't fall asleep right until midnight or 11:30 or whatever it is? Think about that true fall asleep time. And most people aren't factoring that in. They're usually like, oh, I get into bed at 11 and that's when sleep starts. But even a well-rested person takes about 15 or 30 minutes to fall asleep. So we've got to factor that time in. Then you count down to the time that you're getting up. Your alarm clock, and not factoring in snooze bar, because that's going to be interrupted sleep that you might get after a snooze bar.
Okay, wait. So we should not be snoozing. I'm doing
That
this
is
for my
another
husband
one of
specifically. But
Sorry, honey.
sorry.
So many people rely on the snooze alarm.
Over and over again.
So many people. But really what you're doing is cutting some of the best sleep of the night short. Because rapid eye movement sleep, which is so beneficial for our cognition, our critical thinking, our creative thinking, that predominates in the second half of your night. And so those 2 to 3 hours before you wake up is the most rich with rapid eye movement sleep. And so if you're hitting your snooze alarm, you're going to cut short that really important part of your sleep. And any sleep that you're going to get thereafter is going to be fragmented sleep. So when it comes to snooze bar, I'm so sorry to your husband, to everyone out there, but you will thank me later. One of the best things is to just try to push your wake up time as late as possible.
Got it.
Ask yourself really honestly, how long does it take me to get ready, to get out the door? Set your alarm for that latest time and kick your butt, get out of bed. Say, it's time to start my day. And ideally, get outside as early as you can, because getting outside and getting natural exposure to sunlight stops the floodgates of the sleep hormone melatonin. And so flips the on switch to your day. So being mindful of those two things can help overcome some of the addiction, hopefully, to snooze bar.
To snooze. And then, so is it okay if I know you talked about consistency versus quantity, and your argument is that actually consistency is more important with sleep, I believe, than quantity of hours? Or can you break that down if not? And is it okay then if I go to bed at midnight every night, but wake up at 8, or 7, versus going to bed at 9:30 and waking up 8 hours later?
Really great question. So increasingly, we're starting to talk about this term sleep health. The nice thing about this term is it encapsulates kind of a broad array of dimensions of sleep that are important. So duration is important, but it's just part of the equation. Consistency of sleep is really important. As much, if not more so, than getting enough sleep is keeping consistent sleep schedules. What does that mean? Say you fall asleep truly at 11 o'clock at night. You wake up at 7. And so say that that's your target work week schedule, but then on the weekends, Friday, Saturday rolls around and you're pushing your bedtime to 12, 1, 2, and then you wake up 9, 10, 11. What you've physiologically just done is shifted your internal biological clock to a new time zone. You've given yourself, your body, and your brain information that I've gotten in an airplane and I've flown to London from New York. And so then Sunday night rolls around and your biological clock is going to be fighting against you when you crawl into bed early, thinking, oh, I'm doing a good thing. I'm getting into bed at 9, 10 early. And then a lot of people experience insomnia on Sunday night because of that, because you're fighting your biological clock. So consistency is key, and so much so that if you are looking at a fun Friday or Saturday night and plans out with friends, the best recommendation is actually to take that in stride, stay up, enjoy it, and look at it as, this is a treat. But you've got to pay the price by getting up as close to your normal time as possible. So if that was 7 a.m. during the work week, maybe push to 8 a.m., not much longer, because if you push longer, again, you're going to self-impose that feeling of jet lag that we just talked about. So get up as early as possible and then pay back any lost sleep or sleep debt, which is the difference between the sleep that you biologically need and the sleep that you're getting. So in that case, a bedtime of 1 a.m. gives you a sleep debt of 2 hours. And maybe you pay that back with a nice long nap on Saturday afternoon. That pays back the sleep debt without negatively impacting your internal biological circadian rhythm.
What if I can't nap?
This is a great question. I hear this all the time. What is so interesting about napping is that even a few seconds or minutes make a huge difference. What I really like about that, and this is some research from MIT, they found that literally 60 seconds in a nap during the day boosted creativity in the afternoon. Wow. And so that just really lowered the bar significantly to anyone who's like, oh, can't nap, won't nap.
Right.
But if you need it, set your alarm for 20 minutes in the afternoon. If you're exhausted, you stayed up way too late on Friday, for instance, then set an alarm in the afternoon, crawl into bed and tell yourself, if I get a little sleep, great. If not, I just rested my brain, because any little bit during the day, if you're exhausted, will help. But then if you're not able to nap, just realize that you're going to get great sleep the next night. Get into bed a little early, not too early.
Yep.
But, maybe closer back to that 11 o'clock or maybe 10 or 10:30.
Okay.
And then you can slowly start to pay back that sleep debt.
So if we zoom out a little bit, what is actually happening in our brains and bodies when we sleep? Like, why? It sounds so silly, right? But why is it so important?
It's a great question. I think it's there's kind of a myth that we fall asleep and we enter this monolithic process called sleep, and then we magically wake up and hopefully we feel good, and hopefully we don't feel bad. But sleep is this really rich, really elegant process. So as soon as our head hits the pillow, we enter some of the lighter stages of sleep. Stage 1 and stage 2 are characterized by a slowing of brain waves. Those stages are also, however, very easy to wake someone from. So if you're drifting off and there's a fire engine or a police siren, outside your window, you're going to be likely to wake up in response to that sound. And after about 20 minutes, you enter your first rapid eye movement period of the night. And that's what we refer to as paradoxical sleep, because the brain is highly active, as much, if not more so, than the wake state, believe it or not. And our body is very inactive. And then there's deep sleep, which is what we as humans, the closest that we get to hibernation, where our body temperature goes to its lowest point in the 24-hour day. Our blood pressure drops to the lowest point in the 24-hour day, which is essential to just allow ourselves to really take a break. And if you think of, anything that goes up must come down, and that dipping is vitally important in temperature, blood pressure, heart rate, just to let everything take a break, right? And that natural dipping that takes place during sleep is essential so that people that aren't getting enough sleep are at greater risk for hypertension, in large part because they're missing some of that natural dipping in blood pressure.
Got it.
We are ebbing and flowing in and out of those 4 really beautiful stages of sleep over the course of our night. So we don't just go stage 1, 2, deep sleep, REM, and then back out, but we go in and out 3, 4, or maybe more times over the course of our night. And so that cycling looks a little bit different every time. In the first half of your night, we have a lot of deep sleep. And that's where a lot of that total body recovery, muscular regeneration happens. And then we spend more in each cycle in rapid eye movement sleep towards the second half of the night, the time before we wake up. REM is where we get a lot of the benefits cognitively from our sleep. So connections between otherwise abstract memories. We also, during rapid eye movement, spend about 80% of our time dreaming. And dreaming is fascinating, and we think part of the way that our brain makes sense of different memories. And so that's why sometimes our dreams are so wild. It'll be your second grade teacher and someone you saw in the subway or the tea yesterday. But it's your brain's kind of really beautiful ability to process by which it determines which memories go together, and importantly, which memories do I not need, maybe? Because if you think about it, we take in so much information over the course of the day. We can't possibly include and keep everything stored away. But what are the memories that we don't maybe need is actually a really important, evolutionarily important process. So if we're hitting the alarm clock and cutting our sleep short at 5, 6 hours, then you're going to virtually be robbing yourself of your potential, because you're leaving an hour or maybe 2 of rapid eye movement sleep on the table.
Okay, so we now know why sleep is so important, and we've learned that good sleep is more than just getting the recommended 8 hours. It's about both duration and consistency in our routines. Next, Dr. Robbins will lay out what we need to do to reset our sleep and give us tips for dealing with the things that throw our schedules completely out of whack. We'll be back in just a few moments. And we're back with sleep scientist Dr. Rebecca Robbins. I want to get a little bit more to like stress around sleep. And I don't know if you have a phrase for this yet, but like the sleep stress or the sleep anxiety of like wanting to perform so well in this that we get more stressed about creating all the right circumstances versus just saying, okay, I'm okay. Like some nights I'm going to sleep, some nights I'm not going to sleep. But do you have anything just preliminarily to dispel about sleep stress and how we approach all of this like new sleep performance work that people are doing?
This is such a good question. And there's one group of people that are known for experiencing sleep difficulties, and those are type A personalities. Yeah, which is probably no one, right, that's listening to this podcast. Joking, because it's probably everyone. And so, really high-achieving, performance-driven people have likely already tried to hack a number of other areas of their life, personally, professionally. They're tracking their steps, their workouts, and then they realize that sleep is the next frontier, and they take that on. And if that high-achievement, perfectionist type of a person then starts to track their sleep and become more interested, the thing about sleep is it's not going to be perfect every night. But that is really hard for someone who's achievement-oriented
and looking at their score on their Aura or their Fitbit or whatever every night. Yeah,
Bingo.
Every morning.
We can set ourselves up for success, do everything right. But then say something stressful happened to you in your day, and that stress wasn't addressed with breathing exercises or journaling or being able to talk to your therapist or your spouse, any number of, healthy strategies. And I think in our, broadly speaking, in our performance-driven culture, we're very kind of reactionary. So we get emails, we react. We're, sending, we're doing. And we're not allowing for enough time over the course of the day to address those stressors. And so it can all kind of hit us at night, just when we're trying to power down, when we've suddenly said, okay, I'm going to turn off my computer. I'm going to turn off my TV. And suddenly you've had some space and to just breathe and kind of process everything. And then so much can hit you at that time. So one of the best recommendations for really all of us, but anyone who finds themselves a little bit stressed or overly worried about their sleep, is asking yourself before you fall asleep, what's really on your mind, and writing it down on a piece of paper. Even if it's, truly what's going on in the Middle East, write it down. Or, if it's a to-do list item, pick up the dry cleaning, call your mom or your dad, or, pick up your kids, whatever it is that's stressing you out, write it down on a piece of paper. It can be so powerful because then you look, at that sheet of paper and it's down here instead of, up here bouncing around. So that's one of the best recommendations for anyone who has some difficulty or anxiety around falling asleep. But I think broadly speaking, the kind of self-talk and how we talk to ourselves about sleep is also really important, because one of the things that we can fall into is negative self-talk about our sleep. Instead, confidence in your ability. And as night approaches, think, I got this. No worries, I've got this. And if you toss and turn, whether you struggle to fall asleep or you wake up and can't get back to bed, one of the best recommendations is to leave your bed. And I'd love to say,
so like
totally.
Everyone's like, no, you don't do that. It's the middle of the night. Like you're going to mess up your whole next day. I mean, all of that.
Totally. But by getting out of bed, you start to make bed the reward. Every time you're experiencing insomnia or difficulties, get out of bed and come back when you're tired. And if it's 15 minutes, if it's 20 minutes, staying out of the bed, keeping the lights low, even if you live in a studio apartment here in New York City, find a comfy place and do a breathing exercise or two. And then when you're tired, get back into bed. Because what we've built up in that process is something called sleep pressure. And there are two processes that result in our ability to sleep. The first is sleep pressure. So that's your overall feeling of sleepiness, that sense of just being exhausted and ready to fall asleep. Now, the second process is something called our circadian rhythm. We've touched on this a little bit. It's a Latin term for circa dies, or things that ebb and flow around an approximate 24-hour day. And sleep is one circadian rhythm, and then there are hormones that are firing or retiring over that process of a 24-hour day as well.
Right.
Melatonin is one of them. So those two processes interact. And ideally, we've built up our sleep pressure over the day, and that coincides with our kind of biological sleep time. And that time when melatonin is secreting and we're falling asleep is something that we really have to work on over time. And we largely get there through consistency in our sleep schedules and being careful about when we're exposing ourselves to light because of the important role of light in the circadian rhythm.
We also have all these other inputs, right, that impact how we sleep, right? So television, media, our phones. I mean, there are so many. Can you talk a little bit about some of the barriers that you think are most challenging and maybe some ways for us to kind of combat that?
Great question. And there are untold barriers to our sleep. It almost seems like everything is a threat. I think the CEO of Netflix actually said that sleep is his biggest competitor. And so realizing that some of these devices, software, social media are really set up to keep you plugged in. I think just being mindful of that can help you set up some guardrails. I think we draw so much attention to when we wake up. Our alarm clock, the time is seared into our brains that we need to get up, to get to the office or work or school or whatever. And if we drew that same attention to the time we want to be powering down, I think could go a really long way. And so thinking, everyone listening, what your target wake up time is, and maybe count back, let's say 8 hours for now, and then add 15 or 20 minutes at least to allow you to relax and unwind. And think about that time right now. Everyone listening, whatever that is for you, count back from your wake up time, 8 hours, and then add 30 minutes. And sear that time in your mind. For me, it's 10 p.m. So finding whatever time that is and protecting it could go a really long way for all of us and our ability to get enough sleep.
We're like 10 o'clock, I want to be asleep. And
Totally.
It's like you don't start doing things at 10, you start doing things 30 minutes earlier. So.
Ideally. And then being a little bit mindful in the 30 minutes that's earlier from that bedtime routine time of ideally you're off screens at that point. So that's, maybe 9-ish hours before you're waking up or, give me 10, that would be great. And if you're telling me, look, I can't fit it in with my work schedule and my school, all of us have stuff that we could do off screens. And so maybe it's being diligent about leaving a report to review off screens or writing down a to-do list for the next day instead of spending more time on screens. Just try to switch in those last 30 minutes to something that is off screen. And then, even if it's 15 minutes, ideally about 30, but we're building in some time to relax and unwind. If that's reading a book, wonderful. If that's practicing a breathing exercise, amazing. And I use the word breathing exercise because some people are very stressed about the word meditation. I say meditation, everyone's eyes
like, oh my God,
over. I can't do that. Way too busy. And so it's so almost
triggering.
Yeah, totally for so many people. But breathing exercise is like, oh, I breathe. I can do that.
Yes.
And one simple one that I love is the 4-7-8 breath technique. And it's cool because it's just this random number of numbers and ordering of numbers. And so I think that helps us kind of get out of our heads and into our bodies. But it goes like this together. Let's breathe in for 4. And then hold for 7. It's a long time. And now purse your lips. Exhale for 8. And now open your eyes. And if you did that 1 or 2 times, suddenly you've put yourself in the driver's seat of your stress. And you've taken control of your heart rate, your mind. It's the most powerful tool. And those are all the things that we need to be doing before bedtime.
We were talking about barriers. One of my questions was new parents, shift workers, people who work in hospitals, for example, that are like, I'm an emergency room doctor, or, my shift starts at, midnight and goes to 8 a.m. and then I sleep. And, it's like all of these things are cycles that happen in our lives. So in relation to the conversation around like sleep stress, how would you talk to people who are in those positions that say, well, this all sounds great, but it's just not my life now?
Totally. I couldn't agree more. A new parent will lose on average 500 hours of sleep in the first year of their child's life.
Wow.
It's a huge number. And I'm incredibly empathetic because I've been there and it is really, really hard. So for any new parent out there, it can be a protracted period of time. It's not just a couple weeks. So the key thing when you're in that phase of life is to realize that you are at serious risk of accidents, of mental health concerns. And so do everything you can to get sleep in, at least one good nap while the baby naps. And I really don't like the recommendation, nap when the baby naps. Like, come on, because then the baby's napping all the time and you have a million things to do, right? You want to, organize the baby's clothes and do laundry and cook and then try to breastfeed or organize bottles or whatever it is. And so if you can get one good nap, and remember, even if that's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a good bout of sleep, even short, can be the difference, right? Between a good day and a not very good day. Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about the other category of occupational barriers. And those are unfortunately impacting our most underserved communities, or often shouldering a greater burden of night shift, of rotating shift jobs than others. And so a big part of my research portfolio is focused on designing interventions for shift work populations and supporting them. If you are in that occupation, a big thank you from all of us, because it's how our society is powered, our hospitals, our law enforcement, our fire, rescue, so many aspects. In those situations, think about kind of like the new parent, getting back on track whenever possible. There are also tips and strategies. If you're a doctor, for instance, and you work overnight once a month, you can think about after that night shift, going home and wearing sunglasses so that you actually try to trick your brain that the sun is setting and you're going into your bedroom and melatonin can secrete. And so kind of tricking your brain that you're, it's nighttime can be one strategy, and getting home and trying to create your bedroom environment in a place that's ideally soundproof, that's dark. And these things don't have to break the bank. There are blackout shades that you can tack to any existing curtain that are very inexpensive. So think about blackout curtains, maybe a white noise machine, earplugs, eye mask, so that you could get some consolidated sleep after your shift. And that is key, because truly the timing doesn't necessarily matter if your bedroom is designed to support you and your rest. So it's free from noise, it's free from sound, it's free from light. Then you could theoretically get a good amount of sleep. And if you're able to protect that time 7 days of the week, the challenging thing is not many shift workers are, because they often have young kids. And they need to take them to school, or they have errands to do like everyone else. They need to go to the bank, and those hours are 9 to 5. So for all of those reasons, think about, those strategies, supporting your sleep health however you can, and then ideally getting off of that shift schedule as soon as possible.
So we are in a culture where, everybody watches Shark Tank. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. People want to build things. They want to create things. And part of that conversation, of course, is, we're maybe losing some of the stigma around the fact that, you sleep in your dead. But there's still a pull for people who are working really hard and or have shifts and or are new parents and or all of these things that are barriers to good sleep. Can you confirm for people that you can come back from this? If you have a period where you're like, I am, for 2 years, I just have to work my butt off. I'm getting a degree, I have kids, whatever's happening. And then I want to be able to come back to a place of health. Are we ruining our health forever by having these periods where we have sleep issues or we aren't sleeping to the optimal point? Or can our bodies regenerate and then, shift into a new phase and be okay?
This is such a good question. If we're speaking to that person who's like, look, I need to grind, I need to provide for my family, I need to get my degree, I need to do X, Y, or Z. These are such admirable goals. And so realizing that you might be in a time where you're not getting the best sleep of your life, but know that that too hopefully will pass. And I would implore you to think about, even, with all of the priorities that you have, find those times, the latest possible time that you can wake up, the latest possible time that you can get off your screen. Maybe if you can't hit your sleep number every night, how might you find some consistency? A time, if it's 6 hours, hopefully it's 7 at least, every night where you are off duty, whether that's off mom or dad duty, off, work duty, and you are giving yourself time to repair, your brain to relax, your blood pressure to drop, because it will set you up to succeed in whatever you're trying to achieve. That will allow you to wake up and be energized and crush your goals, whatever they are, personally, professionally. Good sleep will get you there is the dirty secret.
Got it. So the other thing that you've talked about when it comes to finding a solution to improving our sleep is some of the behaviors. And you've touched on some of these, but I just want to like make it really clear for everybody what we can be doing, because I've heard you say good sleep starts with what you do when you wake up, which is kind of a shocker, right? Like most of us think good sleep starts when I go to bed. What are some of the behaviors that you'd recommend that we take on to be able to set ourselves up for good sleep from the start of the day?
I like to roll these out in a series of, maybe let's start with 8 of my favorite things. And yes, good sleep does start as soon as you wake up at your target wake up time. Try to get outside into the natural, fresh air, natural sunlight as soon as possible. And then conversely, as you approach bedtime, try to get away from screens that are emitting blue daylight spectrum light. Ideally 30 minutes, but if you can give me 60, if you can give me 90, even better. So being mindful of the light that we're exposing ourselves to. We've talked about getting enough sleep. I don't have an antidote, but finding your personal sleep need. For some of us, it's 7. For some of us, it's 8. And then for others, it's 9. And being aware of what your true biological need for sleep is. Doing your best to meet that need night in and night out. Next is consistency, finding a time that you can fall asleep and wake up and keep those times as consistent as possible, 7 days a week. And if you push past your fall asleep time, no worries, take it in stride, but realize that if you can get yourself out of bed as early, as close to that normal wake up time as possible the next day, you're going to be in much better shape than if you blow through that time and impose what we talked about, some of the circadian desynchrony, or we call this social jet lag, where you're self-imposing jet lag, often for social reasons. The bed environment is really important. Being mindful of your mattress. How recent have you bought or not recent your mattress? Your pillows, good quality pillows. But the stuff doesn't have to break the bank. A great mattress can be just around $1,000. It's a lot of money, but $1,000. And if you're thinking about that over 8 or 10 years, that's a pretty long stretch of time. And then the bedroom environment itself of quiet, dark, cool. And if your bedroom isn't dark, look into some blackout curtains, find ways to get light out of the bedroom. And if it's not quiet, think about earplugs or a white noise machine that would help kind of level the playing field in your bedroom without having intermittent noises like maybe a siren or a fire truck outside. So protecting yourself as much as possible from those external noises.
Okay, so 2 things I want to push back on that. Like, what about for people who are like, I just have unwound with the TV for my whole life. That's how I unwind. And so that works for me. I feel like you've been very good at not telling people to fully overhaul their lives, but
Totally. Well, here's the thing. I think sometimes we can get a little too focused on all of these things and think, oh my gosh, these are my 10 steps that I have to do for sleep. And no, it's ruining my routine and what I love. Here's the thing. If it's not broken, don't fix it. So if TV truly is how you relax and unwind, and I do have people who say, listen, I've been falling asleep to Friends or Seinfeld for my entire life, and I feel, a connection to them and they make me feel relaxed, then you've actually built what's called a sleep association. That TV or that podcast or, whatever it is that helps you fall asleep is actually a vitally important part of your routine, and hold on to that. I just say, if you find, you're struggling with sleep, or maybe if you're falling asleep outside of the bedroom to television, those might be the 2 things. If you're falling asleep in an armchair and then get into bed and toss and turn, then it might be something to rethink. But if it's part of your sleep, routine, then by all means carry on.
Let it be. Okay. And then, we've talked a little bit about trackers and, what I like about the personalization of sleep, which is where we started quite a while ago, is the way that it seems like you're describing it is we don't have to do all these crazy things to figure out when we should go to bed and how much sleep we need. Would you say that when it comes to, wanting to know those 2 things, that trackers are really helpful? How would you say we should relate to trackers? And are those the 2 things we need to know? How much sleep do I need? And am I a morning or a night person?
In full disclosure, I do work with Oura Ring. I've worked with them for a number of years.
I see you've got yours on.
I do. So I am a data nerd. I love seeing the numbers. Some people, that may be stressful. Really asking yourself, are you setting a goal about sleep that you want maybe some feedback on? For many people, it can also be an accountability tool. So really promoting awareness about what time am I really falling asleep? What time am I waking up? But it can also prompt reflection of, if you wake up and you didn't have a good night, then what did I do yesterday or maybe not do that I could rethink the next day? So I like them for those reasons, but it is important to note there's a term called orthosomnia where individuals who are maybe a little achievement oriented start to track and really seek perfection in a number of areas of their lives. And then they open their tracker and they saw a bad score and they spiral and it's stressful. And then suddenly it causes this downward spiral towards some insomnia-like symptoms. So that would be a case where I would definitely recommend taking a break, going off trackers for a week, 2 weeks, and then coming back to them when you have a maybe healthier association.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely got into that. I was tracking for a couple of years and I was watching, and I remember when I first moved in with my partner my husband, who is a sleeper, late at night, I noticed my sleep score went down and I was like, oh, I'm going to lose it. I was like, I need to get this thing back
I love
up.
this person, but I can't do this.
I was like, I am going to, and I have always been a sleeper. I've always been like, no, I need the sleep. I need a lot of it. And like, I love it. And so that was
everything.
like, I was like, I'm going to lose my mind. So it was an interesting thing I stopped tracking because I was like, I don't need to freak out about this. Like, I'll be okay. But it took that period of going, wait a second, I'm overdoing this. And there have been periods where I've done that because I love data too. And so I'd be tracking it, but I'm tracking not necessarily just for the information, it's for the goal of hitting that this was a good night score. Yeah.
I love that. And that's a perfect application because it's helping you stay on track with your goals. And if you get a number, you're like, oh no, it was only, 8.5 hours last night. I'm gonna work hard to get into bed early and get off screens and build in my bedtime routine so that I can set myself up for a good night.
For success. Yeah. So that's not a worry. Yeah. So Rebecca, 3 questions for you. I'm going to have you complete these 3 statements for me.
Okay, cool.
The first is better humans are
well rested.
Shocker. The second is better work is.
Better work, in my opinion, ideally would be focused on quality and not the hours at the desk or the hours, in a 24-hour span that you're available on email, but a focus on quality of output.
And a better world has.
I don't mean to sound silly, but I really believe this is actually something that I say often is a world well rested. And importantly, that has the tools and the knowledge to empower themselves and work towards being well rested.
And when we rest better, what changes for us?
It's hard to think of what can't change when we're well rested. I think we could all, agree after a good night's sleep, you feel like you could take on the world. When we can prioritize sleep, we're more compassionate, we're more mindful, we make better decisions, we're less emotionally reactive, we make more ethical decisions. So many things are turned in a positive direction when we can make sleep a priority.
Wow. Thank you so much for being here. This was great. I loved having you.
Thank you for having me. The pleasure was all mine.
That was sleep scientist Dr. Rebecca Robbins, an assistant professor in medicine at Harvard Medical School. If you like this conversation, text it to the first person who comes to mind. It might be just what they needed to hear. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. He makes sure we sound good in the studio. Tim Boland mixed our show. Andres Cardona is our video producer. We get additional support from Alex Kutsniatsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Enrique Montalvo is our executive producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Coop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.